She was humiliated by her ex-husband flaunting his glamorous new fiancée, until she arrived with a quiet man whose shocking secret turned the entire room upside down. What began as a night of public embarrassment became a powerful tale of redemption, revenge, and a love that arrived when she least expected it. You won't believe how it all ends. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Rain drizzled lightly on the sidewalk as Evelyn Blake stepped through the doors of the Langford Gallery, shaking off her umbrella and smoothing her charcoal gray overcoat. At 61, she carried herself with the kind of grace that came only from enduring life's harshest storms and still standing tall. Her silver-streaked auburn hair was neatly pinned, and her elegant navy blue scarf accented her soft, thoughtful eyes. She had come to the gallery to support a local arts fundraiser, one of those quiet social nights where no one expected anything dramatic, just wine, music, and polite conversation about brushstrokes and textures. She hadn't expected to see him, but there he was. Charles Blake. He stood near the wine table, laughing loudly with a group of men in tailored suits. He looked nearly the same, 64, still tall, still broad-shouldered, his salt and pepper hair immaculately styled, his suit sharp as ever. Evelyn felt a knot twist in her stomach. It had been 4 years since the divorce. 4 years since the shouting matches about money and pride. 4 years since he had accused her of settling for mediocrity, and she'd finally stopped defending her dreams and walked away. And now, Charles was here. And he wasn't alone. On his arm was a woman with striking beauty and a glimmer of wealth. Amanda Grant, maybe 60, though the facelift and perfect posture shaved 10 years off her appearance. She wore a pearl-white gown and an air of entitlement. Evelyn remembered the name vaguely, one of Charles's business acquaintances from years ago. The one he'd said Evelyn was being paranoid about when she found late-night texts. Charles saw her before she could turn away. "Evelyn?" he called, voice booming across the marble floor. A few heads turned. Evelyn smiled politely, even as her pulse jumped. She steadied herself and walked over. "Charles," she replied evenly. "It's been a while." Amanda turned to look her up and down with a practiced smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You must be the ex-wife. I've heard so much." "I'm sure you have," Evelyn said coolly, refusing to be baited. "Well, I must say, you look comfortable," Charles added with a smirk. "Still doing the interior design thing?" "I own a firm now," Evelyn replied. "We specialize in boutique hotels. We just signed our 5th contract." Amanda blinked. Charles's smirk faltered slightly. Before the conversation could twist further, another presence entered the room, and Evelyn felt the tension in her shoulders melt. Daniel Whitmore. At 65, Daniel carried himself like a man who had nothing to prove and everything under control. He wore a simple dark suit with a burgundy tie, his hair neat, his expression composed. He didn't need flash. The quiet confidence in his walk, the warmth in his eyes, did all the talking. He came to Evelyn's side and gently touched her back. "Sorry I'm late," he said, brushing a kiss on her cheek. Charles stiffened. "And you are?" he asked, clearly puzzled by this man who looked more like a retired professor than someone worth envying. "Daniel Whitmore," Daniel said calmly, extending a hand. "I'm with Evelyn." "Charmed," Amanda said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Charles is my ex-husband," Evelyn added for Daniel's benefit, her voice cool. Daniel nodded, his gaze neutral but firm as he shook Charles's hand. Evelyn could feel the electricity crackling in the silence between the men. Charles tilted his head slightly, sizing Daniel up. There was something in Charles's eyes, a flicker of curiosity, then dismissal. "Well," Charles said at last, clearly unimpressed, "I didn't expect to see you here, Evelyn. But I suppose everyone's trying to rub elbows with the elite these days." Daniel offered a smile that could cut glass. "I'm not really one for elbow rubbing. I'm more of a write the check and skip the flash kind of guy." Amanda blinked. Charles frowned. Evelyn bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. "Enjoy the evening," she said, slipping her arm through Daniel's and walking away with more poise than she felt. They stopped near a modern sculpture made of twisted copper and glass. Daniel leaned in and whispered, "Friend of yours?" Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was my ex-husband. He always thought charm could make up for cruelty." Daniel tilted his head. "And the woman?" The woman is why we divorced. Daniel didn't flinch. He simply offered her a flute of champagne from a passing server. Then let's drink to closure. Or karma, whichever comes first. Evelyn smiled despite the heat in her chest. For years she'd wondered what she'd do if she ever saw Charles again. Rage? Collapse? Run? Instead, she stood beside a man who didn't belittle her dreams, who never raised his voice to feel powerful, who never needed to be the loudest person in the room. And for the first time in a long time, Evelyn felt like she had already won. 2 days after the fundraiser at Langford Gallery, Evelyn Blake was standing by her kitchen window, watching the morning sun stretch across her small garden. A cup of steaming tea warmed her hands, but her mind kept returning to that night, to the way Charles had looked at Daniel, and to the tension that simmered beneath Amanda's pleasant facade. Something about it all felt unfinished. The chime of her phone pulled her back to the present. A notification blinked on the screen. You're invited. Charles Blake and Amanda Grant cordially request your presence at their engagement celebration at the Hawthorne Grand Hotel. Evelyn blinked. What in the world? The digital invitation was laced with gold script and pomp. It was addressed directly to her, not +1, not guest. Just her name, front and center. She scrolled down. There it was, an RSVP link, glittering like bait. She set the phone down on the counter, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. The gall of it. Charles had never been subtle, but this, inviting his ex-wife to his flashy engagement party as if they were old friends? Was he trying to prove something? Was Amanda behind this? A power play? A twisted olive branch? The questions swirled in her head as she grabbed her coat and headed out for a walk. By the time she reached the park near her neighborhood, she had called Valerie Adams her best friend and loyal companion through every storm life had sent her way. Valerie, a retired trial attorney with a sharp tongue and even sharper intuition, answered on the second ring. You saw the invite? Valerie said immediately. No hello needed. Evelyn let out a dry laugh. So it's not just me. Nope, I got it too, except mine was a group email, like I'm just a name on a list. Yours was personal. Charles is definitely fishing. Fishing for what? Evelyn asked, pacing past a bed of yellow tulips. Attention, validation, maybe a reaction from you. The man always needed an audience. Evelyn sat down on a bench. Do you think I should go? There was a pause. Only if you're walking in with your chin up and a dress that screams, I'm thriving. Otherwise, skip it. I know Charles. He'll turn that ballroom into a spotlight if he thinks he can humiliate you. Evelyn looked out at the jogging path, silent for a beat. I don't want revenge, Val. I want peace. But I also don't want to keep hiding from him. Valerie's voice softened. Then go. Just don't go alone. When she returned home, Daniel was waiting on the patio, sipping espresso and reading the newspaper like a scene from a magazine. She sat beside him and handed him her phone with the invitation still open. He read it, then looked at her. Bold move, he said calmly. Understatement of the year, Evelyn muttered. Daniel set the phone aside and studied her face. Do you want to go? I don't know. Part of me feels like I should, like it's time to stop flinching every time his name comes up. He nodded slowly. Then let's go. She turned to him, surprised. You'd come with me? Of course, he said simply. You're not walking into that lion's den alone. Besides, I suspect the man still thinks I run a hardware store. Evelyn chuckled, despite the anxiety curling in her chest. What if it's a trap? What if they're hoping I'll embarrass myself? Daniel gave a small smile, the kind that said he had seen this all before, in boardrooms and behind closed doors where egos clashed like titans. Then we'll give them nothing. We'll be polite, poised, and if they expect a scene, let them be disappointed. The week before the party passed like slow thunder. Evelyn kept herself busy, reviewing design concepts, finalizing hotel proposals, and pretending her stomach didn't twist every time she thought about standing in that ballroom again, with Charles and Amanda hosting like royalty. Valerie sent photos of dresses with captions like, "This one says, I'm richer than regret," or "This one says, I only age backward." Daniel, true to form, didn't press. He simply asked once if she was sure. When she said yes, he kissed her hand and replied, "Then we go with quiet confidence, and if it gets ugly, I'll handle it." The day of the engagement soiree arrived with unexpected clarity, Sunny skies, crisp air, and the scent of lilacs floating through Evelyn's open window. As she stepped into her gown, a deep emerald that shimmered like moonlit water, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone far removed from the woman who once cried behind bathroom doors, wondering why love had turned into combat. Now, there was steel beneath the satin, and she wasn't going in to prove anything to Charles. She was going to remind herself she had already moved on. Daniel appeared in a tailored black tuxedo, looking at her like she was the only person in the world worth admiring. "You ready?" he asked. Evelyn smiled and took his hand. "Let's go." The Hawthorne Grand's ballroom shimmered like something out of a dream or a billionaire's fantasy. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the high ceilings, casting a warm golden glow over the sea of couture gowns, designer tuxedos, and champagne flutes. Evelyn Blake took a slow breath as she stepped into the space, her hand resting lightly on Daniel Whitmore's arm. She looked radiant in her emerald gown, the color hugging her frame like it had been chosen by destiny itself. All around them, heads turned, not just because she was beautiful, but because there was something magnetic about her poise, as if she no longer owed the past anything. Daniel's calm presence beside her was like armor. He guided her with a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the loud ambition saturating the room. Evelyn could feel eyes on them, not in mockery, not in pity, but in genuine curiosity. It didn't take long for Charles to spot them. He was standing near the stage, a glass of champagne in one hand, his other arm wrapped around Amanda's waist. He was wearing a navy silk suit with a smug grin that slipped just slightly the moment he locked eyes with Evelyn. Amanda turned and her expression faltered just for a beat before she pasted on her most polished smile. "Well, well," Charles said, striding toward them like the mayor of a town he thought he owned. "You made it." Evelyn offered a gracious nod. "Thank you for the invitation." Charles's gaze shifted to Daniel. "And you brought him." Daniel extended his hand calmly. "Daniel Whitmore." Charles hesitated just a second too long before shaking it. "Of course," he said, trying to mask the faint condescension in his tone. "We've heard very little about you, and yet I've heard a great deal about you," Daniel replied smoothly. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and Evelyn could practically feel the tension simmering beneath the surface. Amanda stepped forward, air kissing the space near Evelyn's cheek. "So lovely to see you again, Evelyn. You look well." Evelyn smiled, unbothered. "Thank you, the same." A server passed by with glasses of champagne. Daniel took two, handed one to Evelyn, and turned to Charles. "Quite a turnout. I imagine it took a small army to organize." Charles chuckled, puffing his chest. "Only the best. Amanda has incredible connections. Washington, Boston, Palm Beach, you name it." Amanda beamed, her diamond necklace catching the light like a spotlight. Suddenly, a tall, broad-shouldered man approached. Gerald Grant, Amanda's father. His presence was colder than the champagne being served. He looked Daniel up and down with barely concealed suspicion. "And you are?" Gerald asked, his tone clipped. "Daniel Whitmore," Daniel said, nodding politely. Gerald's eyes narrowed slightly. "I don't believe we've met. What's your background, Mr. Whitmore?" Daniel paused for just a breath. "Philanthropy, technology investment. I try to keep a low profile." Gerald grunted. "Low profiles tend to be a veil for questionable resumes." Evelyn's eyes flashed, but before she could say anything, a commotion broke out near the entrance. Two uniformed security guards began weaving through the crowd. One of them approached the group with an apologetic expression. "Excuse me, Mr. Whitmore," the guard said. "We've received a tip about a guest using a false identity. Would you mind stepping aside while we verify?" The room went still. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She turned sharply to Charles, whose face was a picture of mock surprise. Amanda's expression wavered. Gerald stood with arms crossed, unmoved. Daniel remained composed, like he was being asked the time, not accused of deceit. "Of course," he said, "but I'd like to know who sent the tip." Before anyone could respond, Gerald raised his hand. "That would be me," he said loudly. "I've heard rumors. This man claims to be a philanthropist, but no one knows where his money comes from." A murmur spread like wildfire. Guests craned their necks. The music dimmed. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Daniel didn't blink. He reached into his inside jacket pocket, calmly pulled out a sleek black business card, and handed it to the security guard. This number will connect you directly to the ArcLight Group's executive office. They'll verify my credentials." The guard nodded, muttering into his earpiece. Evelyn glanced at Charles, who had gone pale. Amanda's lips tightened. Gerald's confidence faltered. Moments later, the guard returned, expression changed. "Confirmed," he said. "Mr. Whitmore is a principal investor with ArcLight Technologies and several global philanthropic organizations. We apologize for the disruption." Daniel gave a polite nod. No harm done. But the damage had been done, just not to him. The silence in the room was deafening. Gerald mumbled something under his breath and stepped back, visibly rattled. Amanda looked like she wanted to disappear. "Charles?" Charles looked like a man who had just been publicly stripped of every ounce of pride. Daniel turned to him, voice calm but cutting. "Congratulations on your engagement. Evelyn and I will be taking our leave now." He took her hand, and together they walked through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers followed. But this time, they weren't whispering about her past. They were marveling at her present. And as Evelyn stepped out into the cool night air beside the man everyone had underestimated, she knew, without doubt, this was the turning point. Whatever came next, the power to face it was already hers. 2 mornings after the Hawthorne incident, Evelyn Blake sat at her kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of tea and flipping through the local newspaper. The headline caught her off guard. "Socialite's fiancé under investigation for fraud. Insiders say family pulled out of engagement deal." Her heart skipped. She blinked, reread the line, then slowly folded the paper shut. So it had begun. Charles. The name didn't appear in the headline, but it didn't have to. The article made vague references to a high-profile merger involving questionable documentation and an unnamed source close to the Grant family who claimed to have uncovered inconsistencies in projected earnings and investor claims. Evelyn didn't need a legal team to fill in the blanks. This had Charles written all over it, his obsession with optics, with ambition, with climbing whatever ladder was tallest in the room. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Evelyn." The voice was raw, desperate. "It's Charles." Of course it was. "I know you've seen the news. Look, I didn't think it would get this far. I just need someone who knows me. Someone who knows this isn't what it looks like." Evelyn closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her temple. "What do you want?" "They've frozen my accounts. Amanda's father pulled out of the firm. Lawyers are circling me like vultures. I'm boxed in. I don't know who to trust." "You don't trust anyone, Charles," she said quietly. "That's always been your problem." There was a long pause on the line. Then his voice lowered, the arrogance replaced with something like regret. "I was wrong about Daniel. He made me look like a fool and didn't even break a sweat." "No, Charles, you made yourself look like a fool," she replied. "Daniel just didn't hide the truth." He exhaled sharply. "I didn't call to rehash the past. I need your help." The plea hung there, uncomfortable and familiar. Evelyn remembered this voice from years ago, when money was tight, when Charles had lost a client, when he'd needed her to dip into her retirement savings, just this once. Always one more favor, one more bailout, always wrapped in a justification. She looked out her kitchen window where her tulips were beginning to bloom again. Spring was returning, even if the past kept trying to pull her into winter. "I can't help you," she said softly. "Not this time." His voice hardened. "You're really gonna let me drown? I'm not letting anything happen to you. You made your decisions. Now you get to live with them." Silence, then a bitter scoff. "Well, I hope he's worth it." She hung up. The quiet that followed felt like a release, like an old, heavy chain had finally snapped loose. Later that evening, as golden hour light spilled across her living room, Daniel returned from a 3-day business trip. She met him at the elevator, and the moment she saw his face, she knew. This man was home, not just a person. They embraced without words. She leaned into his chest, the scent of his cologne grounding her like soil after a long drought. "Did I miss anything?" he murmured against her hair. She pulled back, studying his face. Charles called. Daniel's brow lifted slightly. "Let me guess, he needs a lifeboat." Evelyn nodded. "He's sinking fast. Amanda left him. Her father's legal team is coming after him. He wanted me to help." Daniel was silent for a beat. "And what did you say?" "I said no." A quiet smile curved his lips. He didn't need more explanation. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. They moved into the living room, where she filled him in on the news articles, the speculation, the phone call. And though a piece of her still reeled from how surreal it all felt, another part of her, stronger now, watched it unfold like someone else's story. A parable, not a wound. "I don't feel angry," she said almost in wonder. "Not anymore, just done." Daniel poured them each a glass of wine and handed her one. Closure has a strange way of showing up, doesn't it? They clinked glasses gently. Evelyn took a sip and exhaled, feeling the tension melt off her shoulders. He said something before he hung up, asked if you were worth it. Daniel met her eyes, steady and calm. "And what did you think?" She reached across and took his hand. "You were worth every scar it took to find you." Outside, the city lights flickered to life one by one. Inside, Evelyn finally felt like the chapter had closed, not with a dramatic finish or a grand revenge, but with quiet clarity and the firm sound of a door shutting behind her. She didn't need to turn back anymore. The following weekend, Evelyn Blake stood at the edge of the rooftop garden at the Crescent Arts Pavilion, a glass of champagne in one hand, a soft spring breeze playing with the ends of her hair. The city glittered below like a living map of light, and somewhere inside the building, a string quartet played a delicate rendition of Clair de Lune. The night was meant to honor the architects behind the city's cultural renaissance, and among them was Evelyn herself. Her newest hotel design had been awarded a sustainability grant and would soon be featured in an international design journal. She hadn't expected any of this. Not at this stage in life, not after everything. But here she was, receiving praise not because of who she was married to or connected with, but because of what she had built with her own hands. Daniel Whitmore joined her, slipping an arm around her waist as he passed her a small dish of crème brûlée from the dessert bar. His quiet smile said more than any toast ever could. He was dressed in a soft charcoal suit, and he looked, as always, effortlessly powerful, though he rarely tried to take up space. "I heard someone call you the woman who redesigned the future of boutique hospitality," he teased gently. "I hope I corrected them and told them I still can't figure out how to work my own espresso machine," she replied with a grin. Daniel chuckled, brushing his thumb across her hand. "You deserve all of this, Evelyn." She looked out over the skyline. "For a long time, I thought all the good things were behind me, that I'd had my chance, love, success, and blown it." He studied her for a moment, his voice low. "You didn't blow it. You outgrew it." Evelyn felt the words settle in her chest like warm light, and he was right. She hadn't failed. She'd survived, and then she'd rebuilt. Around them, the party sparkled on, conversations, laughter, toasts being made. She caught glimpses of friends and acquaintances, including Valerie, who waved enthusiastically from across the garden, champagne in one hand and a mischievous smile on her lips. "Valerie looks like she's about to make trouble," Evelyn mused. "She usually is," Daniel said, amused. "I think she's trying to convince the gallery director to feature local retirement home artists next month." "I fully support that revolution," he said. "Art should never retire." They laughed together, and Evelyn leaned into him, resting her head briefly on his shoulder. Later, when the evening began to wind down and the guests filtered out, Evelyn and Daniel returned to his penthouse. The driver navigated the quiet streets while Evelyn watched the city roll past, lights flickering like stars along every window. Inside the penthouse, the space felt as it always did, elegant, warm, understated. The newest addition was the painting Daniel had gifted her at a previous charity auction, a swirling landscape of color and movement, now proudly mounted above his fireplace. She kicked off her shoes and sat by the large window, pulling her knees to her chest as she gazed at the city. Daniel returned with 2 mugs of peppermint tea and sat beside her. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if we'd met earlier?" she asked suddenly. He sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Sometimes. But then I wonder, would we have recognized each other for who we are now? We were still learning ourselves back then." Evelyn nodded slowly. "That's true. You're not the same woman you were with Charles. And I'm not the same man I was in my 40s, trying to buy respect with money." She looked at him, really looked at him. "You never made me feel like I had to be anyone else. You didn't fix me. You just saw me." Daniel reached for her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Because you didn't need fixing. You just needed space to breathe. A lump formed in her throat, but she welcomed it. It was the kind of ache that came with healing. As the clock edged toward midnight, they sat in peaceful silence, hands entwined, the city beyond their glass walls humming like a lullaby. Evelyn thought back to the girl she had been in her 20s, eager to please, hopeful, always compromising. Then to the woman in her 40s, bruised from battle but still trying to hold together a marriage made of cracks. And now, here she was, in her 60s, no longer trying to prove anything. Not to Charles, not to society, not even to herself. She had let go of a man who measured love in terms of leverage. She had found one who measured it in presence. And more than anything, she had found herself again. Layer by layer, piece by piece. Whatever storms lay ahead, she would face them as she was now, grounded, loved, and unapologetically whole. The woman who walked away from the ballroom that night wasn't just the ex-wife of a ruined man. She was the author of her own story, and she was just getting started. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of Evelyn's journey. If you're still here, it means this story touched something real in you, and we're deeply grateful for your time. Evelyn's story reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim your worth. Walk away from what no longer serves you, and choose peace over pride. Life doesn't end after heartbreak. Sometimes it actually begins there. When someone underestimates your strength or tries to define your future with their past mistakes, remember, you always have the power to rewrite the ending. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share powerful emotional stories every week that speak directly to the heart, stories of love, resilience, and second chances. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Until then, take care of your heart and never let anyone make you feel small for growing strong. We'll see you in the next story. A pregnant wife finds lipstick on her husband's collar, and instead of screaming, she invites his mistress to dinner. What follows is a chilling face-off filled with secrets, betrayal, and a stunning twist no one expected. Will love survive the lies, or will everything fall apart under the weight of deception? You won't believe how this ends. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping, emotional stories that stay with you. The rain whispered against the windows of the Bennett estate, a soft patter that blurred the lights of Seattle into dreamy streaks beyond the glass. Inside, the house was still, eerily still. The staff had been given the week off per Julia's request. She'd said it was to enjoy the quiet before the baby came, a time to reflect. But tonight, that silence pressed down like velvet on her chest, heavy and suffocating. She sat on the edge of the living room sofa, one hand absently stroking the curve of her 6-month pregnant belly, the other clutching a mug of chamomile tea gone cold. Her green eyes never strayed far from the grand front entrance, waiting for the inevitable sound of Ethan's return. It came just after 9, the soft purr of the Tesla, the click of the garage door, the slow shuffle of dress shoes across the marble foyer. She didn't move. Not yet. She listened instead, like a hunter waiting for her prey to wander closer. Ethan Bennett, 36, heir to one of the Northwest's most powerful real estate dynasties, stepped inside with the usual crisp confidence. His coat was damp from the mist, his expression carefully neutral. But Julia saw it in the way his eyes avoided hers. Something was wrong. She had known for weeks now, gut instincts sharpened by pregnancy hormones and late-night silences. But tonight, the truth made itself visible in the smallest of betrayals. As he bent down to untie his shoes, the collar of his white dress shirt shifted, and there it was, a faint but unmistakable smear of deep red lipstick on the edge of the collar. Her stomach twisted, not with nausea, but with icy confirmation. That shade wasn't hers. She hadn't worn lipstick in months, not since the nausea had started. That color, berry red, was too bold for her anyway, too loud. Someone else had worn it. Someone who had leaned in too close. Ethan looked up and froze when he caught her gaze. For a brief second, he hesitated, as though considering retreat. But he offered a smile instead, weak and forced. "You're still up," he said, setting his keys on the entry table. "I couldn't sleep," Julia replied, her voice smooth, devoid of emotion. "Baby's been kicking." He nodded and made a move toward the stairs. I'll just go change. Ethan, she said softly, stopping him in his tracks. He turned, surprised by the quiet authority in her voice. Why don't you sit down? I poured you a glass of wine. He blinked, confused. Wine? For you, just one glass. I thought we could talk. It's been a while. Her smile was almost tender. She gestured toward the armchair across from her, where a half-filled glass of Merlot waited. The air smelled faintly of vanilla candles and something else, tension, thick and invisible. Ethan approached cautiously, sitting stiffly. She studied him as he picked up the glass, eyes flicking briefly to his collar. He noticed and reached up, brushing a thumb against the mark. His jaw clenched. Must have. Someone bumped into me at work. There was a marketing rep. Stop, Julia said, not unkindly. Don't lie. He looked at her, guilt blooming across his features. I didn't mean— I know, she interrupted again. I believe you didn't mean to. That doesn't change what you did. He sank back, wine forgotten. Julia, I'm not here to argue, Ethan, she said gently. I've had hours to think about this, about what it means, about who she might be. The firelight danced against the high ceiling, casting long shadows behind them. For a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the antique clock over the mantel. Then she stood. I'm going to do something that might surprise you, she said, walking slowly toward the stairs. Tomorrow night, I'd like to have dinner. You, me, and her. Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Julia, you can't be serious. I'm very serious, she said without turning around. You've already brought her into this marriage. The least I can do is look her in the eyes before deciding what happens next. You want to destroy me, he whispered, panic flickering in his voice. I don't want to destroy anyone, she replied. But I refuse to be destroyed either. She paused at the top of the stairs, hand resting lightly on the banister. 7 o'clock, formal dinner. No excuses. Then she disappeared into the darkness, leaving Ethan alone with a cold glass of wine and the unmistakable scent of lavender and iron, the smell of resolve. The city lights blinked below Sasha Monroe's penthouse window like a field of distant fires, but tonight she felt no warmth from them. She sat curled on the edge of her leather sofa, staring at her phone in disbelief, replaying the voicemail over and over again. Ethan's voice, usually cool polished, was tight with dread. Sasha, call me back. Julia knows. She wants to meet you. Dinner. Tomorrow night. The words hit like ice water. She'd always known this moment could come. That wives, even the seemingly oblivious ones, always knew something. But never in her wildest calculations had she expected this. Not a confrontation. Not screaming in a parking garage. Not a thrown glass of wine or a whispered threat in a women's restroom. No, Julia Bennett had invited her to dinner. To dinner. Sasha leaned back, gripping her glass of Chardonnay so tightly she feared it might crack. This wasn't a social misstep that could be fixed with charm. This was a summons. And Julia was not the type to bluff. She stood and paced, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a clock ticking down. At 29, Sasha was no stranger to risk. She'd clawed her way out of a 2-bedroom rental in Sacramento and into Seattle's elite social circles through ambition, style, and an uncanny instinct for where power pooled. Ethan Bennett had been her latest move, charming, wealthy, slightly wounded, the perfect mark. At first, she'd told herself it was just strategy. Then came the whispered compliments, the late-night messages, the business-class weekends to Vancouver. Eventually, she stopped pretending it was just about the money. But now she was one invitation away from being destroyed. She picked up her phone again and dialed Claire Jensen. Claire had once been her mentor, sharp, poised, well-connected, but now she was Julia's closest friend. Claire answered on the second ring, her voice smooth but wary. Sasha, that's rare. I need to ask you something, Sasha said, skipping the pleasantries. Has Julia said anything about me? There was a long pause. She doesn't say anything she doesn't want others to hear. Why? She invited me to dinner. Another pause. Then a quiet whistle. She invited you? Yes. To the house? Sasha swallowed. Yes. Claire's voice dropped into something like reverence. Oh, sweetheart. What does it mean? Sasha asked, breath catching. It means, Claire said slowly, that Julia already knows everything she needs to know. She's not inviting you for answers. She's inviting you to see how you handle being out of your depth. Sasha sank back onto the couch. So it's a trap? No, Claire replied. It's worse. It's a stage, and she's going to hand you the script and dare you to speak. For the first time in a long while, Sasha felt like the girl who once folded jeans at a department store, who waited tables while dreaming of silk and diamonds. All the bravado, the perfect hair, the calculated seduction, it felt like a paper mask about to be torn in half. But then something cold and sharp settled in her chest. No, she would not be humiliated. She would not be a footnote in someone else's marriage drama. Julia wanted a dinner? Fine, let it be a performance. She marched to her closet and began pulling out options. Red was too bold, blue too soft. Eventually she settled on a fitted black dress, elegant, reserved, unforgiving, like armor. She clipped her hair into a sleek bob and stared at herself in the mirror. "I'll play the part," she whispered to her reflection, "but I write my own ending." Still, as she curled into bed that night, she couldn't sleep. The silence of her penthouse seemed louder than usual, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was coming. Her phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m., a message from Ethan. "I'm sorry, she's serious. Just be careful tomorrow." Sasha stared at it for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. But she didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The Bennett estate had never looked more elegant. Candlelight flickered against polished glass and gilded frames, casting warm shadows along the marble floors. The dining room table, usually set for 10, had been scaled down. Just 3 place settings, a deliberate intimacy that felt more like a chessboard than a dinner arrangement. Julia Bennett moved through the space with calm precision, checking the silverware, adjusting a crystal glass by half an inch, smoothing the navy blue runner as if the fabric itself would reflect her control. Her silk dress hugged her pregnant form gracefully, her hair pulled into a sleek twist at the nape of her neck. She looked every inch the poised hostess, composed, radiant, unreadable. Claire stood nearby, arms crossed, a tight crease between her brows. "You sure you want to do this?" Julia glanced at her friend, lips curving faintly. "It's already done." Claire sighed and walked toward the kitchen, muttering something about having paramedics on speed dial. Julia didn't flinch. She hadn't flinched since last night. Fury would have been easy. Screaming, throwing his things onto the lawn, slapping his face in the hallway. That would have given Ethan an easy escape. No, this required clarity. Precision. She would not be the broken wife wailing in the background. She would sit at the table, look both of them in the eye, and decide their fate with perfect stillness. The doorbell rang. Time slowed. Julia turned toward the entrance, her hand resting gently on the side of her belly, grounding herself. Claire opened the door. Sasha Monroe stood on the threshold, wrapped in an air of polished self-preservation. Her black dress fit like it was sculpted for her, her bob sharp enough to cut glass, a single diamond glinting at her ear. But her eyes, dark, alert, betrayed the tremor beneath. She stepped inside, the heels of her stilettos clicking across the marble floor with carefully measured confidence. "Good evening," she said, voice even. Julia extended a hand. "Thank you for coming." The handshake was brief, cold, civilized. "Ethan is in the study," Julia added, as she led Sasha through the foyer. "He'll join us shortly." Sasha nodded, eyes scanning the house. Expensive art, family heirlooms, signs of history and permanence she couldn't match. She walked like someone prepared to defend herself, even as her gaze flitted nervously to the side doors and corners of the room, as if anticipating an ambush. They entered the sitting room, where a low fire flickered in the hearth. Julia gestured to a velvet chair. "Something to drink? Sparkling water? Wine?" "Water, please." Julia poured it herself, handing the glass to Sasha with elegant grace, then sat across from her, ankles crossed, expression calm. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence stretched like piano wire. Then Julia broke it. "You must have questions." Sasha blinked. Honestly didn't know what to expect. Julia tilted her head. An ambush? A public meltdown? A screaming match? Sasha gave a small, dry laugh. Something like that. "Well, that's not who I am," Julia said. "I don't believe in chaos. I believe in clarity." A pause. Julia's gaze didn't waver. "Tell me, what does this relationship with my husband mean to you?" The bluntness knocked the air from Sasha's lungs. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at the glass in her hand, watched the bubbles race to the surface. "I care about him," she said quietly, "but I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Julia's smile was soft, sad, deadly. Things like this don't just happen. You don't fall into someone else's marriage by accident. You climb into it, step by step, cocktail by cocktail, lie by lie. Sasha's breath hitched. She had come prepared to defend herself, but Julia wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She was dismantling her with nothing but quiet truths. The sound of footsteps made both women turn. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face pale, his suit impeccable, his eyes hollow. He looked from Julia to Sasha and swallowed hard. "Thank you for coming," he said to Sasha, voice dry. "Let's move to the dining room," Julia announced, rising from her chair. The three of them sat, Ethan on Julia's right, Sasha on her left. The salmon was perfect, the salad untouched, the tension thick enough to choke on. Claire served in silence, her disapproval a quiet wall behind Julia's back. For several agonizing minutes, no one spoke. Then Julia placed her fork down with delicate finality. "How long has this been going on?" Sasha stiffened. Ethan looked down. 6 months, Sasha whispered. Julia nodded once as if confirming a theory. She turned to Ethan. "Did you plan to leave me?" "No," he said too quickly. "I was confused. I didn't." "You told me you felt trapped," Sasha cut in, voice rising despite herself. "You said you hated this marriage, that it wasn't your choice." Ethan's face drained of color. Julia leaned back in her chair. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, unshaken. "I spent the last few months wondering if it was me, if I wasn't enough, if the pregnancy changed something between us. And now I realize this wasn't about me at all." Silence fell again. Then Julia turned to Sasha. "Do you love him?" Sasha stared, mouth parted. "I don't know." Julia looked away. "That's what I thought." And with that, she folded her napkin, set it on the table, and stood. "Dinner is over. Thank you for your honesty." Sasha blinked, stunned. Ethan started to speak, but Julia raised a hand. "I'll speak with my husband now, alone." The quiet finality in her voice was like the closing of a door. Rain returned to Seattle like an old friend that never stayed away for long. It slid down the windows of Sasha Monroe's penthouse in long, trembling lines, distorting the skyline into a blur of lights and silhouettes. But even with the city veiled in silver, there was no hiding from the storm brewing inside. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone pressed to her ear, heart thudding with each passing second of silence. Then the voicemail played again. A man's voice, low, distorted. "You should have left, Miss Monroe. This is your final warning. Get out of Seattle or regret it." The message ended with a click that echoed louder than it should have. Sasha stared at the screen, jaw tight, knuckles white. Her breath came in short bursts, more from rage than fear. Someone was threatening her. But who? There was one name she couldn't ignore. Julia. Sasha wanted to believe the poised woman at that dinner table wouldn't stoop so low. But then again, Julia had made herself very clear. "Leave, or I will destroy everything you've gained." She picked up her phone again and called Ethan. He answered immediately, his voice on edge. "Sasha? Someone just called me," she snapped. Same voice, same threat. This time they said it was my final warning. He exhaled heavily. "Did you call the police? And tell them what? That my lover's wife might be sending anonymous threats?" She let out a bitter laugh. "They'd love that." "Julia wouldn't do this," Ethan said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Sasha paced the room. "You don't know what she's capable of when she's pushed. That woman is ice, controlled, strategic. I saw it in her eyes. She doesn't scream, she executes." Ethan sighed. "I told you, she said she'd protect her family, but she promised she wouldn't cross the line." "She wouldn't have to," Sasha countered. "Maybe it wasn't her directly, maybe it's someone close to her." Ethan went quiet, too quiet. "What?" she asked sharply. "My father," he said almost under his breath. Sasha froze. "Victor?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He confronted me this week, threw a tabloid across his desk, said I was jeopardizing the family's reputation. He threatened to handle it himself if I didn't." Sasha sat back down, heart hammering. He could have hired someone. "I wouldn't put it past him," Ethan muttered. She was silent for a long beat. Then her voice steeled. "I'm not running, Ethan. Not until I know what I'm up against." "Don't provoke him," Ethan warned. "You don't know what he's done in the past to protect the Bennett name." "I've come too far to be scared into silence," Sasha said coldly. "If someone wants to scare me, maybe it's time I made noise instead." Later that evening, Sasha met with Pamela Wells at a discreet rooftop bar in Belltown. Pamela, tall and commanding in a cream trench coat, raised an eyebrow as Sasha approached. "You look like hell." I've had better days." They ordered drinks and found a quiet corner. Sasha leaned in. "Remember when you said you had connections? Journalists?" Pamela's lips curled into a satisfied smirk. "Finally ready to play offense? They're threatening me now. Midnight calls. Warnings to leave town." Pamela stirred her drink slowly. "And you think a well-placed article might give you some insurance?" "I want the story out there," Sasha said. "Let the city see what the Bennetts are willing to cover up." Pamela's gaze sharpened. "You realize this will set fire to everything. Your name, Ethan's, Julia's. There's no undoing it once it starts. I'm not the only one with something to lose." Pamela considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll set up the meeting. The Tribune owes me a favor." The next morning, Ethan sat across from Julia in their sunlit kitchen, his nerves frayed, his coffee untouched. She was folding tiny baby clothes, smoothing out creases with the same calm precision she used at that dinner. He hesitated before speaking. "Julia, Sasha says she's getting threats, calls in the middle of the night. She thinks it's you." Julia didn't even glance up. "It's not." "She's scared, and I thought you said you'd protect our family without crossing lines." She met his eyes then, slow and measured. "If I wanted her gone, Ethan, she'd already be gone. I don't do scare tactics. I do results." He swallowed hard. "You swear it's not you?" "I swear." She paused, then added, "But your father?" "I can't say the same." Ethan's stomach turned. He knew his father well enough to believe it. 2 days later, a sensational article lit up Seattle's digital headlines. "Mistress of a real estate heir speaks out. Secrets, threats, and the truth behind the marriage." The names were omitted, but the clues were unmistakable. The affair, the powerful family, the pregnant wife, the dinner invitation. It all painted a picture. One everyone in Seattle's elite could decipher in minutes. Julia read it at breakfast, her phone buzzing nonstop. Ethan stared at the screen in horror. "She actually did it," he murmured. "She went public." Julia placed her teacup down with perfect care. "She declared war," she said softly. "Now let's see who wins." The fallout hit harder than Ethan could have imagined. Overnight, the Bennetts became the center of Seattle's most salacious scandal. Headlines danced across social media. Real estate heir exposed in love triangle. Pregnant wife's chilling dinner with mistress sparks citywide frenzy. Even with the names blurred, everyone knew. The timing, the details, the whispers at every country club and charity gala, there was no hiding now. Julia maintained her usual grace in public, appearing at scheduled events with a calm smile and perfectly tailored coats that gracefully hugged her growing belly. But at home, the mask cracked. She barely spoke to Ethan, and when she did, her voice was clipped, hollow. The pain hadn't broken her, but it had hardened something inside her. Ethan, meanwhile, lived in a storm. His father, Victor, summoned him to the top floor of Bennett Holdings. The panoramic view of Seattle stretched out behind the old man like a kingdom. But he didn't look out the window. He tossed a tabloid across his desk. "What the hell were you thinking?" Victor barked. "This isn't just your mess, it's our brand." "I'm trying to fix it," Ethan said hoarsely. "I didn't know she'd go to the press." Victor slammed a palm on the desk. "Of course she did. She's hungry. She sees blood in the water. And you gave her the knife." His voice dropped. "Handle this, Ethan. Pay her off. Make her disappear. Or I will, and I won't be gentle." Ethan stood frozen. The voice from Sasha's phone echoed in his mind. Get out of Seattle, or regret it. He didn't want to believe it. But now he was sure. Later that night, Ethan asked Sasha to meet him at the rooftop lounge of the Thornfield Hotel, where the press rarely ventured. She arrived in a storm-gray trench coat, her heels clicking like defiance across the marble floor. She took one look at him and crossed her arms. "So this is the part where you beg me to leave?" Ethan looked exhausted. Older. Defeated. "Sasha, you're in danger. I think my father was the one threatening you. He won't stop. I figured as much." She sat, slow and deliberate. "And now you want to pay me to vanish, like a line item on your father's ledger?" "I want to protect you," he said. "But I also need to protect my wife, my daughter." Sasha flinched. "So that's it? I burn everything to the ground, and you get your happy family ending?" Ethan's voice cracked. "I never meant for it to go this far. None of you ever do." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notepad and pen, pushing them across the table. "Write it down," she said. "Everything I'm getting. I won't start over empty-handed." He hesitated, then wrote, "A generous sum, enough to start fresh anywhere." She read it, folded it once, and slid it into her coat. She didn't say goodbye. Within the week, Sasha sold her penthouse and boarded a flight to Los Angeles. No statement to the press, no final swipe on social media, just a quiet exit from a city that had given her everything and taken more. But peace did not come easy for the Bennetts. One evening, Ethan came home to find Julia sitting in the study, a bank statement open in front of her. She didn't look up when he entered. "You paid her off," she said. "I had to." Julia finally met his eyes, and what he saw there crushed him. Pain, disappointment, fatigue. "So she betrays me, humiliates me in front of the entire city, and you reward her?" It wasn't a reward. It was the only way to end it. She stood slowly, one hand on the small of her back. "I agreed to forgive you, Ethan, but I didn't agree to forget." "I know," he whispered, "and I'll spend the rest of my life earning that forgiveness." She didn't respond. A week later, as a brittle winter settled over Seattle, Julia collapsed in the nursery, pain slicing through her lower back. Ethan rushed her to the hospital, heart pounding with every red light he ignored. Their daughter was born 6 weeks early, tiny but healthy. They named her Sophia. In that hospital room, surrounded by soft beeping machines and a sea of pale linens, Ethan held Sophia's hand with trembling fingers. Julia lay in bed, pale and exhausted, but when she looked at their daughter, something softened in her expression. "We move forward," she said quietly, "but I'll never be the same woman you betrayed." Ethan nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I don't expect you to be. I just hope you'll still be mine." In the days that followed, life resumed its slow rhythm. The media buzz faded. The baby brought smiles, late-night feedings, and brief moments of warmth. But in the quiet hours, when the lights dimmed and the city stilled, Ethan would catch Julia staring into the dark, silent, thoughtful, guarded. He knew the war wasn't over, but she was still there. And for now, that was enough. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this powerful story. If you're still here, it means this tale touched something deep inside, and we're truly grateful for your time. What can we take away from Julia and Ethan's journey? That love, no matter how grand, can fracture under the weight of lies. But also that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through quiet decisions, firm boundaries, and choosing dignity over revenge. Trust, once broken, takes more than words to rebuild. It takes time, truth, and the courage to face pain head-on. And sometimes, healing means carrying scars, but walking forward anyway. Now we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. It always amazes us how far these stories travel and how they connect people from every corner of the globe. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional, thought-provoking journey. We've got more coming. Tales of betrayal, redemption, love, and lessons that stay with you long after the screen fades. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, your story matters.